She had prayed for a child for years, but the day her prayer was answered was the day her marriage died. The rain wouldn't stop that morning. Seattle was gray and cold. Through the fogged window, the city seemed to dissolve along with Alara Monroe's heart. She sat in a lawyer's office, a stack of white papers lying before her, words that would erase her name from Damon Whitaker's life. He didn't look at her, not once. He just signed, stood up, and walked away, as if 5 years of love had never existed. The door closed. The clock ticked. Her breath broke into a silent sob. Alara's trembling hand reached into her purse. Beneath a folded tissue lay a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines, proof of something that had come too late. She placed a hand on her stomach, tears falling soundlessly. "He'll never know," she whispered. Outside, the rain kept falling, a witness to a secret she could never tell. 6 years later, fate would make him look into the eyes of a little girl, carrying his smile. If you've ever loved deeply, lost painfully, and still believed in second chances, this story is for you. Stay with it. Rain soaked the streets as Alara Monroe stepped out of the lawyer's office. The folder of divorce papers pressed against her chest like a wound she couldn't close. Her heels splashed through puddles, each step heavier than the last. The city around her buzzed with life. Umbrellas, horns, flashing lights. But she felt invisible inside it all. Her hand trembled as she tried to hail a cab, but none stopped. The cold bit through her coat, through her skin, into her bones. She stood there, alone in the downpour, watching the man she once loved drive away in silence. The rain blurred everything. The skyline, her makeup, her memories. It washed away the last traces of the life she thought she had. For a moment, she wanted to scream his name. Instead, she pulled her coat tighter and walked on. Behind her, Seattle kept shining, tall and proud, a city that had everything she no longer did. Alara found refuge in a small public restroom near the corner cafe. The air smelled of rain and cheap soap. She locked the stall door and leaned against it, trying to steady her breath. Her fingers shook as she reached into her purse. The small white test lay hidden under folded tissues. She unwrapped it slowly, almost afraid to look. 2 pink lines stared back at her, clear, undeniable, merciless. Her knees gave way. She sat on the cold tile floor, covering her mouth to muffle the sob that escaped. Tears blurred her vision, dripping onto the plastic stick in her hand. This was supposed to be joy, a miracle. But not like this. Not when he was gone. Not when every word between them had turned to silence. She pressed a palm to her stomach and whispered to the emptiness, "You're all I have now." Then she tore the wrapper, threw everything into the trash, and wiped her face with shaking hands. Outside, life went on. Inside that tiny stall, a decision had already been made, a secret sealed by fear and love. Across the city, Damon Whitaker sat in his glass-walled office overlooking downtown Seattle. The skyline stretched before him, his empire, his pride. Every deal signed, every award on the shelf, every article calling him a visionary. Proof that he had made it. Yet, the silence was deafening. The hum of success could not fill the hollow space inside him. He sipped his coffee, scrolled through emails, but his mind wandered back to the morning's divorce meeting. He told himself it was for the best, that love was a distraction, that Alara had never understood the weight of ambition. Still, her face, pale, tear-streaked, refused to fade from his thoughts. He adjusted his cufflinks, refocused on the next contract, the next acquisition. Outside, the rain tapped against the windows like a memory that wouldn't let go. He had everything a man could want: money, respect, influence, everything except peace. 2 days later, Alara packed the last of her belongings. The apartment echoed with emptiness. No laughter, no warmth, only the ghost of what used to be. She paused by the window, watching the endless rain blur the skyline she once called home. The city had given her everything and taken it all back. With a deep breath, she turned away. The moving truck waited downstairs. Her life fit into 4 boxes and a suitcase. As she closed the door, a single frame fell from the shelf. Their wedding photo. She picked it up, stared for a long moment, then left it behind. Hours later, the city lights faded in the rearview mirror. Ahead lay Maple Hollow, a small town wrapped in soft hills and quiet streets. No towers, no noise, just the promise of peace. When she arrived, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of pine and earth. She stepped out of the car and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she could breathe. Somewhere behind her, Seattle kept shining, but Alara no longer belonged to that world. In Maple Hollow, life moved slower. The streets were quiet, lined with oak trees and soft morning light. Alara Monroe rented a small cottage at the edge of town with peeling white paint and a tiny porch that looked out on wildflowers. She began taking freelance design work. A few clients, small projects, enough to keep the lights on. Her hands, once used to sketch dreams beside Damon, now built a life from quiet persistence. Her best friend, Lydia Grant, called often, her voice a steady warmth through the long days. Lydia reminded her to eat, to rest, to breathe. When fear crept in, of being alone, of raising a child, Lydia's laughter pulled her back. Every evening, Alara sat by the window with her sketchbook, listening to the crickets. She drew softly curved lines, tiny patterns that seemed to move with life. She was designing her future one page at a time. The silence no longer hurt as much. It began to heal. Winter came quietly. Snow dusted the roof of the cottage as Alara went into labor. The nearest hospital was small, its halls dimly lit, its staff kind but few. Lydia stayed by her side, holding her hand through each contraction. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered. Alara gritted her teeth, tears and sweat mixing as pain tore through her. Hours later, the room fell silent. Then, a cry. Sharp, fragile, alive, it cut through everything. Alara gasped. The nurse placed a tiny bundle in her arms. Sophie Monroe. The name slipped from her lips like a prayer. She studied the baby's face. The same green eyes. Damon's eyes. Her throat tightened, but this time the tears felt different. Not from loss, but from awe. Lydia smiled through her own tears. "She's perfect." Alara kissed the baby's forehead. "You saved me," she whispered. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in a long time, Alara felt whole. The cottage filled with life. Days blurred into a rhythm of feedings, lullabies, and laughter. Alara worked from home, designing logos and posters on her old laptop while Sophie played beside her with colored pencils. Money was tight, but love was abundant. The walls were covered in drawings. Rainbows, flowers, crooked hearts. Each one made the little house feel more alive. At night, Alara would rock Sophie to sleep, whispering stories about hope, about starting again. Sometimes she sang softly, her voice cracked but full of tenderness. There were moments of exhaustion, too, when deadlines piled up, when bills waited on the counter. But then Sophie's laughter would echo through the house, and every worry melted away. Alara no longer dreamed of luxury or grand success. Peace had become her greatest treasure. The girl grew quickly, curious, bright, and full of questions. Her favorite game was pretending to draw dream houses for her and Mommy, each one bigger, with a garden and sunshine all around. Alara smiled every time, because, in a way, they already had that. In Seattle, Damon Whitaker had built everything he once wanted. His company dominated the real estate market. His name appeared in magazines, his photo on the covers. To outsiders, he was a symbol of success. Inside, the silence followed him home each night. The penthouse stretched wide, filled with glass, marble, and nothing that felt like love. He told himself this was the cost of ambition, that happiness was for dreamers, not for men who built empires. Yet sometimes, when the rain hit the windows, he caught himself wondering where she was. He dated, smiled for cameras, hosted dinners with investors. All surface, no soul. When his assistant congratulated him on another record-breaking quarter, he nodded absently. "Great," he said, though it didn't feel like it. At night, the city lights shimmered below, but none reached him. He thought about Alara's quiet laugh, about the way she used to draw on napkins while waiting for him. Those memories had become ghosts. He had conquered everything, and lost what truly mattered. 6 years passed. Damon's driver took a wrong turn one afternoon, ending up near an elementary school in Maple Hollow. Classes had just ended. Children ran out, backpacks bouncing, laughter filling the air. He was about to look away when he saw her, Alara. She stood by the gate, her hair tied back, a soft smile on her face as she waved to a little girl rushing toward her. The child, maybe 5 or 6, had dark curls and the unmistakable green eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Time froze. Damon's heart stopped. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The girl spoke excitedly, showing Alara a paper from school. Alara laughed, that same laugh he had almost forgotten. He watched as they walked to a small car, hand in hand. Alara buckled the girl in, kissed her forehead, then drove away. Damon sat back in his seat, dazed. His driver asked, "Sir, should I keep going?" But Damon said nothing. He just stared at the road ahead, the truth unraveling inside him. He had just seen the life he had thrown away, and the daughter he never knew existed. For hours, Damon Whitaker sat in silence. The image of the little girl with green eyes replayed again and again. It couldn't be possible. And yet, it was. By nightfall, he called a private investigator. His voice was steady, almost calm, but his hand shook as he gave the name, Alara Monroe. 2 days later, the report arrived. Alara lived in Maple Hollow, worked as a freelance designer, and raised one daughter, Sophie Monroe, age 5. 5 years. Damon did the math. The timeline aligned too perfectly. The day she left, the months that followed. He dropped the file on his desk and pressed a hand to his chest. The air in the room felt thin. Anger rose first. Anger at her for hiding this, at himself for never asking. Then grief followed, heavy and cold. A daughter. His daughter. He imagined first steps he hadn't seen, first words he hadn't heard, birthdays he hadn't celebrated, all stolen by silence. And yet, beneath the fury, something else stirred. A fragile, aching need to know her, to make it right. That night, Seattle glittered beneath Damon's penthouse windows. The city looked alive, but to him it was a reflection of everything hollow. He poured a drink, left it untouched. The glass caught the light like the life he'd built. Sharp, cold, breakable. He walked to the window, staring out at the towers he'd once conquered. He had built an empire, and lost his family. How had he not seen it sooner? How had he believed success could fill the spaces love once did? He pictured Alara alone in that small town, cradling a baby he never met. His throat tightened. Every deal, every late night, every empty promise, all of it led here. Sleep never came. Instead, he sat on the edge of his bed until dawn, the first light crawling across the city skyline. By the time morning broke, his decision was clear. He couldn't undo the past, but he could face it. He would go to Maple Hollow. The next morning, the sun broke through thin clouds over Maple Hollow. Alara stood in her kitchen, packing Sophie's lunch for school. The smell of toast and honey filled the room. Then came a knock, sharp, steady. She frowned, wiping her hands on a towel. Few people ever visited this early. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Damon Whitaker stood on her porch. For a moment, neither spoke. The years between them stretched like a wall neither could cross. Damon looked different. Older, paler, but still unmistakably him. "Hello, Alara," he said quietly. His voice carried the weight of everything unspoken. Her fingers tightened on the doorknob. "Why are you here?" "I think you know," he said. His eyes flicked past her shoulder, toward the sound of a child's laughter inside. Her pulse quickened. "You need to leave," she whispered. But Damon didn't move. She's mine, isn't she? The question hung between them, heavy as thunder. Alara's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes glistened, the truth already written in them. Damon's voice broke. 5 years, Alara. You kept my daughter from me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You walked away first. Their words collided. Grief against guilt, love against pride. I thought I was doing what was best, she said. You were gone, Damon. I couldn't even reach you. I was building a life for us, he shot back. I worked every night for our future. She shook her head, trembling. You were building it alone. The silence that followed was brutal. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between them. Finally, Damon exhaled. Does she know? Alara wiped her face. No, not yet. He looked away, jaw tight, voice cracking. You had no right. Her reply came in a whisper. Maybe not, but I had reasons. The words hung like smoke, heavy, unresolved. From the kitchen, Sophie's small voice called, Mommy, who's at the door? Alara froze. Her eyes pleaded with Damon. Not here, not now. He understood, even through the storm inside him. His shoulders lowered. He stepped back from the doorway. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. Give me time. Damon nodded once, barely. Tonight, he said quietly, after she's asleep. We'll talk then. He turned toward his car. The morning light caught his profile, and for the first time she saw something fragile in him. Not anger, but pain. When the door clicked shut, Alara pressed her back against it. Her knees weakened. Sophie appeared in the hallway, holding her lunchbox, curious. Just someone asking for directions, Alara managed with a shaky smile. Sophie nodded and skipped away, humming to herself. Alara leaned her head against the door, tears spilling silently. Outside, Damon stood by his car, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. The truth had found him, and it had left them both undone. When the house finally quieted, Alara Monroe reached for her phone. Her hands still trembled. She dialed Lydia Grant's number, and the moment she heard her friend's voice, her composure broke. He's here, she whispered. He knows. On the other end, Lydia's voice softened. Oh, Alara. Alara tried to speak, but the words tangled with sobs. He's going to hate me. He'll never forgive me for keeping her from him. Lydia was silent for a moment. Then gently, he's not going to hate you. He's going to be hurt. There's a difference. Alara wiped her face, staring at the small lamp that lit her quiet kitchen. I did what I thought was right. I just wanted to protect her. I know, Lydia said, but he's her father. He deserves the truth. And maybe you both deserve a chance to heal. For a long while, neither spoke. Outside, rain began again, tapping softly against the window. Finally, Lydia added, Whatever happens next, you're not alone. You never were. Alara closed her eyes. For the first time all day, she let herself breathe. That night, after Sophie had fallen asleep, the knock came again. Damon Whitaker stood at the door, his expression unreadable. Alara let him in. The air between them was thick with everything left unsaid. They sat in the living room, across from each other, two people who used to share everything, now strangers divided by 6 years. Tell me, he said quietly, from the beginning. Alara nodded slowly. Her voice shook as she spoke. She told him about the day at the lawyer's office, about the test in her purse, about sitting on the bathroom floor, terrified and alone. I wanted to tell you, she said, tears falling freely. But you were already gone, Damon. You'd stopped hearing me long before that day. He listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on the floor. I thought I was protecting her, she whispered, protecting us both from the life we had become. The silence stretched. When Damon finally spoke, his voice was low, rough. You took away my chance to know her. You decided for both of us. Alara met his gaze, trembling. And you left me with no choice. The room felt smaller as the words spilled out. "You had no right!" Damon's voice rose, raw with anger and pain. 5 years, Alara. 5 years I never knew my daughter existed. You walked away first, she shouted back. You built your empire and forgot we existed. Her tears blurred everything. His hands clenched, jaw tight, eyes glistening. I was fighting for us, he said. Everything I did was to give you the life you wanted. I never wanted the money, she said, voice cracking. I wanted you, but you were never there. The words hung in the air, sharp and final. For a long moment, neither spoke. The clock ticked in the background, steady and cruel. Damon's anger began to fade, replaced by something heavier. Guilt. He sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples. Alara wiped her face, breathing unevenly. I didn't hide her out of hate. I was scared. Scared she'd grow up seeing the same emptiness I saw in you. Damon looked up, his expression breaking. Maybe you were right. The fight dissolved into silence, not peace, but exhaustion. Minutes passed before either moved. The storm outside echoed the one that had just passed between them. Finally, Damon spoke, his voice barely audible. I failed you. Alara looked at him, surprised by the softness in his tone. I was so obsessed with proving myself, he continued. I thought success would make everything right, but it only made me blind. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I pushed you away. I let work replace love, and when you left, I blamed you for what I caused. Alara's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were quieter. We both made mistakes, she said. Damon nodded. But mine cost me 6 years of her life. The honesty in his voice cracked something inside her. For the first time, she saw the man she once loved, stripped of pride, fragile, human. Alara whispered, You still have time to be her father, if you really want to. He looked up, meeting her eyes. I do, more than anything. And for the first time that night, the anger between them began to fade. The rain eased by morning. A faint light filtered through the curtains, soft and forgiving. Alara sat at the table, a cup of untouched coffee before her. Damon stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the small garden outside. She doesn't know who you are, Alara said. Not yet. I don't want to shock her, he replied quietly. I just want a chance to know her. Alara nodded, cautious but not cold. It has to be slow. She's young. I'll tell her you're an old friend first. We'll build from there. Damon exhaled. Thank you. For what? For not shutting me out completely. She managed a faint smile. You're her father. I could never take that from her. They stood there in silence, the space between them filled not with bitterness but fragile understanding. Outside, the sky cleared, the first patch of blue breaking through. For the first time in years, they shared the same breath. Not as lovers, not yet, but as two people finally ready to start again. A week later, Damon Whitaker returned to Maple Hollow. His heart pounded as he stood on Alara's porch, holding a small stuffed bear he had bought on the way. Inside, Sophie was coloring at the kitchen table. Alara knelt beside her. Sweetheart, she said softly, Mommy's friend is here to meet you. Sophie looked up, curious. Her wide green eyes, his eyes, met Damon's. Time seemed to stop. Damon crouched to her level. Hi, he said, his voice trembling. I'm Damon. She studied him for a moment, then smiled shyly. Hi, Damon. He offered the bear. This is for you. She hugged it instantly. Thank you. Then, after a pause, she asked, Are you my daddy? The air left his lungs. Alara froze, her hand pressed to her chest. Damon swallowed hard, voice breaking. Yes, sweetheart, I am. Sophie tilted her head as if deciding something, then reached forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Hi, Daddy. Damon's control shattered. He held her tight, tears falling into her curls. Across the room, Alara turned away, silently crying, because somehow it felt like the world had just been made whole again. In the days that followed, Damon visited often. At first, Sophie called him Mr. Damon. Then, Dad slipped out one afternoon, and it stayed. He read to her at night, stumbling through storybooks with voices that made her giggle. On weekends, they baked together, flour on faces, laughter filling the kitchen. The once silent house began to hum with life. He learned her favorite foods, her bedtime rituals, her way of wrinkling her nose when she laughed. Each discovery felt like a gift he didn't deserve. Alara watched from the doorway sometimes, quiet, arms crossed. She wanted to stay guarded, but the sight of Damon kneeling beside their daughter, patient and gentle, kept breaking her defenses. He was trying. She could see it in every small act, the way he listened, the way he showed up. For years, she had pictured him as the man who left. Now, she saw someone trying to come home. At night, when Sophie finally slept, Alara would catch herself smiling without meaning to. The anger she had carried so long began to fade, replaced by something softer, something dangerously close to hope. The weeks turned into months. Damon became a steady presence, not just in Sophie's life, but in Alara's. He stayed late to help with dinner, fixed broken things around the house, learned how to braid hair because Sophie asked. Alara found herself waiting for his car to pull into the driveway. The sound of it no longer filled her with dread, but with quiet anticipation. He had changed. The phone that once rang endlessly for work now often sat ignored when he was with them. He didn't rush away, he stayed. One evening, as they cleaned the kitchen together, Alara caught his sleeve before he could leave. "Thank you," she said simply. He looked surprised. "For what?" "For showing up." He smiled, small and sincere. "I should have done it years ago." After he left that night, Alara stood by the window for a long time. The stars above Maple Hollow glowed faintly. For the first time since their divorce, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, people could change. Spring arrived with soft warmth. On a bright Saturday, Alara, Damon, and Sophie went to the city zoo. It was Sophie's idea. She held both their hands as they walked through the gates, her small voice full of wonder. Strangers glanced at them and smiled. A family, they must have thought. At the penguin exhibit, Sophie gasped and tugged Damon's arm. "Lift me, Daddy," she said. He did, and her laughter rang through the air. Alara stood beside them, sunlight touching her face, watching the two people she loved most. Her heart ached. Not from sadness, but from something bittersweet. Damon turned toward her, smiling, and for a moment it felt like the years between them had disappeared. Later, Sophie fell asleep in the car, her head resting against Damon's shoulder. Alara drove in silence, glancing at them through the mirror. Damon's hand gently brushed Sophie's hair from her face. It was such an ordinary gesture, yet it filled Alara's chest with warmth and tears at once. From the outside, they looked whole again. From the inside, maybe they were getting there. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Damon lingered by the door instead of leaving. The house was quiet, filled only with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of crickets outside. Alara noticed. "Something on your mind?" she asked softly. He turned toward her, hesitated, then said, "I miss you." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, voice low. "I miss us. Not the arguments, not the hurt, just the way it felt to wake up next to you and know we were on the same side." Alara looked away. "That was a long time ago." "I know," he said. "But these last few months, being here, watching you with her, it reminded me what mattered." She folded her arms, trying to steady herself. Her heart beat too fast. "I'm not asking for anything," Damon added quietly. "I just needed you to know." Alara nodded, unable to speak. The space between them felt fragile, full of everything neither dared to say. When he finally left, she stood in the doorway long after his car disappeared, her pulse still echoing with his words. Days turned quietly into weeks. Damon Whitaker was no longer just a visitor in their lives. He stayed for dinner, helped Sophie with her spelling words, repaired the squeaky porch door that had bothered Alara for years. He began to blend into the rhythm of their home. Laughter at breakfast, story time before bed, quiet evenings spent folding laundry side by side. The house felt fuller, warmer. One night, as they sat at the table working on Sophie's school project, Alara looked across the room. Damon was helping Sophie cut shapes from colored paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sophie giggled and corrected him. "No, Daddy, like this." He laughed, letting her guide his hands. The sound filled the house like sunlight. Alara realized that somewhere along the way her fear had softened into something gentler. Trust. Damon wasn't perfect, but he was present, and for her, that was everything. When he left that night, she stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the road, and whispered to herself, "Maybe we're finding our way back." When Damon invited Alara and Sophie to his company's charity gala, she hesitated. It had been years since she'd entered his world of glitter and glass, but Sophie's excitement won her over. That night, Alara wore a navy dress borrowed from Lydia. Simple, elegant. When Damon arrived, his breath caught. "You look incredible." The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and laughter, yet Damon stayed by her side, never letting her feel lost. He introduced her to colleagues with quiet pride. "This is Alara Monroe," he said, his voice steady, "the woman I'm trying to win back." Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't pull away. Sophie twirled nearby in her pink dress, charming everyone she met. Throughout the night, Damon's focus never drifted. When others spoke of profits or mergers, his eyes found Alara's. She noticed how he checked on Sophie, how he listened, how different he seemed from the man she once knew. As they left, the cool night air wrapped around them. Damon looked at her and said softly, "Thank you for coming." Alara smiled. "I'm glad I did." Sophie's 6th birthday filled the house with balloons and laughter. Alara and Damon worked side by side, baking a crooked cake, hanging ribbons, capturing every smile. That evening, after the guests left and Sophie drifted to sleep, the house grew quiet. The glow of candles still flickered across the room. Alara sat on the couch, exhausted but content. Damon joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea. For a while, they said nothing. Then he turned toward her. "Alara," he began, voice trembling slightly, "I spent years chasing everything that didn't matter, and when I lost you, I realized what I'd done." She met his eyes, silent. He took her hands in his. "Marry me again. This time, I'll do it right." Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. Every wall she'd built began to fall. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." He smiled. A smile she hadn't seen in years, real and unguarded. From the hallway came a soft sound. Sophie had woken, standing in her doorway, clutching her beer. "Are we a family now?" Alara nodded through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." Months later, Alara, Damon, and Sophie stood before their new house, a white home with a red maple tree in the yard. The air smelled of pine and rain. Sophie ran ahead, her laughter echoing through the empty rooms. "This one's mine!" she shouted, claiming a bedroom by the window. Alara turned slowly, taking it all in. Sunlight spilling across wooden floors, the hum of something new beginning. Damon came up behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Do you like it?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "It feels right." He smiled softly. "I'll never let this go again." And they unpacked boxes together, hanging Sophie's drawings on the fridge. That night, they ate takeout on the floor, laughing over noodles and spilled sauce. For the first time, home wasn't a place built on perfection. It was built on forgiveness. Outside, the maple leaves swayed in the wind, red as flame, alive with promise. Evenings in Maple Hollow grew gentle again. Alara often stood on the porch, watching Damon and Sophie chase each other through the yard. Their laughter carried into the night, weaving through the sound of crickets. Sometimes she thought about everything they had survived. The loneliness, the pride, the years lost. It felt impossible and miraculous all at once. Damon would catch her watching and smile, that quiet, knowing smile that said, "We made it." Inside, Sophie's drawings filled the walls. 3 stick figures holding hands under a maple tree. Above them, in childish letters, she'd written, "Home." That word meant more now than it ever had. Sometimes love breaks us just to rebuild us stronger. Alara and Damon found what money and fame could never buy: forgiveness and a home filled with love. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. The night deepens. The lights from the house glow warm through the windows. 3 hearts, once broken, now beat in rhythm, together, finally home.